This meeting is being recorded.
Whoa, there we go. And so I'm going to welcome you. Core Connects Rhode Island is an organization that was started a couple of years ago to connect Jewish women with each other. And we do it in many different ways through programmings on Zoom. Zoom really took off, obviously, during COVID. Prior to that, it was all in person, dinners and gatherings and learning and art and all different ways to bring Jewish women of all different ages and affiliations or unaffiliated Jewish women in the Rhode Island area to come together and connect. And so that's what we've been doing, I think, rather successfully. We did have a poetry night a year ago, which was very popular. And Jill, thank you for making the pitch to do it again. So here we are doing our second poetry reading. And this night, here we are, we're about to enter into Tu B'Shvat. And so many of you know that Tu B'Shvat is then one of the 4 new years. It's the new year for trees. And so I'm going to take the executive privilege of starting. I did have a request for somebody to not be the first one, so I'm happy to be the first one. And we have some lovely women who've offered to share poetry. I believe they're all unique and individual self-written poetry that they have that they would like to share with us and that we would like to hear. So that's coming up, and I'll introduce each of the ladies individually as they share with us their poetry or their readings or their musings or their music. I have a very dear friend in Jerusalem. His name is Chaya Lester, and she's a little bit of a Kabbalist. She's a little bit of a renegade, and she lives in Nachlaot, and she wrote something that I would like to share as a kickoff for this Tu B'Shvat poetry night, the Jewish New Year for the trees. There's a story, she says, told in kindergarten classes all over Israel at Tu B'Shvat, and it's called The Birthday of the Almond Trees. And it goes like this. It was the wet of winter. The forest was aflutter, for tomorrow was the birthday of the trees. The birds went from limb to limb, singing, "Tomorrow is your birthday, we will all come to visit." The birds told this to the squirrels and the worms and the winds, and all the creatures and forces of the forest agreed. Yes, tomorrow we will all go to celebrate the birthday of the trees. The forest hummed with great fuss of excitement, but as the sun set, the darkness fell upon the trees and they started to tremble, for they knew that the next morning all the creatures of the forest would gather around to see them, and lo and behold, all would see that they were totally bare, totally naked on their birthday, dressed in no fine flower feather leaves, only bare bark and embarrassment, and they shivered with trepidation of the morning light that would reveal this. The almond tree in particular was so upset by the prospect of the morning that she started to weep and wept terribly all night long, begging for help. Finally, who would appear but the angel of the trees herself? She came and comforted the almond tree and kissed her all up and down her limbs. Come the morning light as the forest came to gather to celebrate the birthday of the trees. They looked and they saw that the almond tree stood there brilliantly bedecked in white blossoms. For every place that the angel had kissed had become a white blossom. The whole forest rejoiced in this sight, and a mighty celebration of the birthday of the trees was had. Sweet story, right? And yet there's a jarring question here. What about the rest of the trees? The lucky almond tree got to wear a gorgeous Ralph Lauren white flower gown. But what about the other trees? Did they just sulk there in the shadows, ashamed of their bareness? We would call this a silly kindergarten story, but I think there's something more to it, for it reflects an essential element of Tu B'Shvat. In psychology, there's a stage of the child's development where the child, still unable to stand up on his or her own, supports herself against a mirror and pulls up on it to stand on her feet. And in the mirror, she sees herself as a full standing individual. Wow. She realizes that she too can stand up like those two towers, mommy and daddy. Of course, the very next minute, she falls back down to the floor and continues crawling around. But for those brief moments, she saw herself as a standing being. Psychologically, it's precisely these fleeting seconds of vision that push the child on to the next stage of development, where the child sees for herself that standing up is possible. It really becomes possible. And so it is with the trees of the forest. When they see the almond tree all blooming, they realize that it's possible for them too to bloom. They're also filled with the desire to become like the almond tree and burst into color as well. This is the glimpsing of possibility that is done on Tu B'Shvat, an early glimpse of what's to come. The world is given a small taste of what is to come in order that it may come. The taste inspires us, teases us, moves us forward. Thus, even as winter is still lingering, we are celebrating the spring. They say, the rabbis say that Tu B'Shvat marks when the sap starts rising in the trees. The sap of the trees has slowed down in the dormancy of winter and stayed in the roots of the trees. And on this day, the sap starts to circulate again and rises to the tree's limbs. So too with us at this time, we feel our energies picking up again, our blood circulating, and this circulation is kick-started by glimpsing the ideal of what is to come. So I'll leave us with that thought, my friend Chai Lester, about Tu B'Shvat, and we'll start with some of our ladies who've offered to present. I didn't mention to you, Claudia, that I was going to call on you first, so I hope you don't mind that. So I'm going to call on my friend Claudia, who just sent me her bio. So I'm going to find your bio, or maybe you should introduce yourself. I don't know where it went. Yeah, Claudia. Okay, so my dear friend Claudia, who I've known a very long time, lives in Boston, and she's the director of Teen Beit Midrash of Hebrew College, a Talmud-focused after-school program for teens, which she started in 2019. In 2018, she became one of the very first 25 women ordained by Yeshivat Maharat, the first seminary to adorn Orthodox women in the United States. Rabbi Claudia is a mentor consultant for Judaic Studies high school teachers through pedagogy of partnership. She teaches a weekly highlights of Daf Yomi, and before she was a Maharat, she developed and taught the rabbinics curriculum at JCDS in Boston. She received a BA in English and a JD from Boston University, her ordination from Yeshiva Maharat, but mostly she's my friend. And she's eloquent and she's lovely. And I invited her to read her writings to us tonight. So Claudia, you're up.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Unfortunately, I missed part of your memo. So I didn't write something myself this time, but
Neither did I.
But I have a poem that I love trees. I like reading poems about trees. I admire the trees in every single season. I take pictures of them. I do some pottery on the side, and I do lots of images of trees on my pottery. But so I decided to share the poem of one of my favorite poets, which I think sort of talks about this time of the year for us, because it's a funny thing. Like in Israel, the almond trees are blooming already, but here they're not very much. And we just had this weather that was this crazy cold weather, which makes us feel like winter is here to stay, and we don't quite yet see the spring. So this poem is called Birches by Robert Frost. I don't know if you know it, but it reminds me to think about different parts of my life and how to hold those to carry on. When I see birches bending to the left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay, as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning. After a rain, they click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored, as the stir cracks and grazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed their crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. such heaps of broken glass to sweep away. You'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed, so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods, years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground, like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in, with all her matter of fact about the ice storms, I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows, some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was that he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them. And not one but hung limp, not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon and so not carrying the tree away, clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully, with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first and with a swish, kicking his way down through the air up to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs, broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away, not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk towards heaven till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches.
Really nice. Thank you, Claudia.
So, yeah, I think there are a lot of Tu B'Shvat themes of cycles and recycles and noticing nature.
Absolutely. Anybody have any comments before we call on Cheryl? You're welcome to unmute yourself if you want to make a comment, or it's fine if we'll just keep going through the lineup.
There's a delightful image that pervades this poem, having to do with the innocent and wide-eyed delight of a child. The poem is not about a child, but it's interesting that Robert Frost uses a child to make his point about bending and rebending and learning not to go too slow, not to go too fast. And I think that Tu B'Shvat, in many, many years in which I taught the lower elementary grades in religious school at Temple Bethel, I came to realize that children, very young children, have an awe-filled delight when it comes to the topic of trees. And trees and I've perceived that to a young child, a tree is very much a living thing, a living being, a sentient being almost. so as I listened to Chloe's reading of this poem, I brought those memories of children's perceptions of trees.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. I'm going to ask Cheryl to read next. Where are you, Cheryl? I don't see you. Oh, there you are. Good. So Cheryl is a wife and a proud empty nester to adult children. She maintains a solo pediatric practice in Massachusetts and is currently studying to add a medical certification in lifestyle medicine. She enjoys the friends she has met in Jewish women's groups, loves studying Jewish mysticism, is nourished by writing poetry. She meditates and she sails. You didn't write that in your in your little bio, but that's a big part of your love of sailing, I think. So if you'd like to share with us your contributions, Cheryl, please.
Thank you. So I didn't specifically choose poems that I wrote about trees, but they feature trees. So and I want to say that I think of poetry and poems as a brush with divinity. So the title, I have a couple of short poems. The title of my first poem is Sandy Visits Fox Point Park. Ripped from their branches, the autumn leaves tumble in agitated arcs of frenzied passage to the ground. The matting trees strike back, their flailing sabers piercing the darkened sky. Battered boathouse flags are throttled atop their jousting spars. The Seekonk River rages, spilling over its wind-shorn banks, washing the meadow clean. Not a soul, save Sandy, is out of doors. I wrote this next poem while I was taking an early morning walk with a dear friend in Nantucket. We were walking toward the cliffs of the island edge, and the scene was so exquisite that I wrote it down at that time. I frequently write poems when I have thoughts or feelings that are aching or screaming inside me that need to get out. So this title of this poem is Walking at Sanford Farm. Sky, crystal blue, deep, clear, as far as the eye can see, barely a wisp of white. A reminder that clouds do exist, but not here. In the sun's silken warmth, we walk over sand and scrub grass. Our conversation guarded by tiny groves of portrait pines dotting the edge of the path. Sweet brine hugs the air, the sweat of the ocean tickling my nose. The music of the sea entices me long before it peeks over the sun-washed sand dunes. I hear the sound of bright, percussive crinkling from the tiny salt sea lake rippling within the sandy banks, like wrinkly paper in my ear. A crisp rush and roar announces the open sea. Spray trailing, the waves slap and roll beyond the spit. Still, the ocean breeze barely stirs the brilliant, blazing island heather, stretching off to the clear blue morning. So next I have, I think I'm going to do three short meditations that involve trees. The first is called Pine Memories. For these meditations, please allow yourself the opportunity to breathe in the experience and to breathe. A lot of breath in these. Breathe in the smell of pine, forests of Maine, of summer, of childhood, the memories of youth, of energy and joy. Breathe. This next poem is called Breathe. Breathe. When the lilacs bloom. When their aroma surrounds my home and fills the air with sweetness. When I am not aware enough to savor that sweetness. To gather a bouquet. This is the time I need to stop. To breathe. To be. And this last meditation is called God's Unfolding Melody. Listen. Children's joy echoing from the canyon walls. Cautious parents' warnings close behind. Listen. Lanky treetops brushing the underbelly of day's skybound clouds. Listen. Be still a moment. Listen. In the air, within the breath, in this moment. Can you hear? Can you hear the awe in this moment?
Thank you, Cheryl. I feel like I'm all senses here, hearing and listening and scrunching and crunching and rippling. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
So nice.
I'm going to introduce Joanna next, please. So Joanna is a mother, a spouse, a writer, an adolescent medicine and family medicine physician, and she loves poetry, and she's our neighbor. She lives down the block, I think.
Yes, yes. All right, well, thank you so much, Alyssa. And it's so nice to be reading with so many familiar and friendly faces. Thank you, Jill, as well. So I was looking through my work and trying to find poems that mention trees or nature. So I found two of them. And they're not necessarily poems about trees only. And this first one was inspired by a poem by Gerald Stern, a great poet who actually died in October, I found out, I think at the age of 97. And his poem was called Bare Bones, and it started, imagine you at the beginning of the longest walk of your life. So this is also a poem about a walk. In spite of the mist, you and she head out on a long walk on Shabbat, dragging the boys, no more lolling around indoors. In spite of the mist, the impending drizzle, and the boys climb the rock walls that cradle the emerald lawns, balancing, darting like cats. The older about to leap over a break in the wall. When you stop him, the younger spots a dead bird, wing white and black plush, and you warn him not to touch it. You could catch Cthulhu's maniacal virus, explains the older. Soon the younger whines that his hip hurts, so she carries him piggyback a while. Strength, a replenishing spring. At times you hold her hand, 4 boots stepping in unison. Other moments, strides are asynchronous, one bringing up the lead or rear, listening to a child chatter about the value of rare magic cards, or silent, and the rain comes, so you hand out the jackets from your pack. Here you are at Wayland's, the runcible spoon, red stripe, but you cannot stop to eat. And at Waterman, you walk downhill to the tiny park, trees bent, underbrush scraggly, the smell like honey, and you all imbibe, and into the river, for your bodies are kayak and rower, streamlined and knotty, strokes rhythmic, past India Point Park with its cement banisters and coiffed maples. And as the current sings, you hug your sons and hold her. And now this second, I did want to mention, in honor of Tu B'Shvat, I think it's a good time to think about the climate and the environment. So there is a wonderful organization you may be aware of called Chazon. I just wanted to put a plug in for them, and another organization we love called the Jerusalem Bird Sanctuary. So anyway, some places to think about.
Joanna,
Yeah.
can I just interrupt you 1 second? So
Yeah, of course.
the person that's director of Chazon is Rachel Siegel.
Uh-huh.
Rachel's coming to Providence. She'll be here and she's doing a program Tuesday night at the Alliance.
Oh, amazing. Oh, okay, wonderful. Thank you. So this second poem is one that I wrote when I had COVID a year ago. And it's a poem in search of a title. But I'll dedicate it to my grandmother who's in it. Knitting in flowers, knitting in names, knitting in earthquakes, knitting in the rain, knitting in bodies to hold them intact, knitting in children, making sure they have their snack, knitting with needles, knitting with bones, knitting in 6 weeks, knitting on the phone, knitting in the species, preserving lives lost, knitting with fire or with spoon-leaved moss. Plant seeds, garter, pearl to a sheen, knit tornado spices, then wash hands till we're clean. Sitting in the sweater my Nana knitted for me, simple, warm, and long, gold, rose, and green. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. I see a rain theme there. Rain and children, beautiful weaving. Thank you so much. I'm going to now introduce our next presenter. So thank you, and really such lovely readings and writings and musings and songs, and anyway, love it. Natalielyalin, her poems have appeared in print and online, and you can go and Google her and YouTube her. She has a handful of her work there. If you ask her what she writes about, she says she doesn't really have an answer to that question. Lots of different topics, including but not limited to family, nostalgia, anger, observation, and occasionally time travel. So that's your introduction, Natalie.
Thank you. And thank you so much for asking me to read. And it's been such a pleasure hearing you all read your own work and the work of others. So thank you for creating such a lovely space. I'm going to read just a few poems, and I think that these are very, some of them mention trees, kind of what Cheryl, in the way that Cheryl talked about. But a lot of them just have to do with renewal and birth and children. So they're tangentially on topic. This first poem is called Birth. Birth. I had no idea of the garbage patch growing in the ocean. I knit a web for you with all the yarn. I spent $5 on a costume. We two were a stone. For you, I climbed the side of a crumbling mountain, made a sloping cake, white frosting, And now I ask, what's wrong with you? Forget things, sink lower in the tub. You said, dunk your face, Ma, but I would not. No, I would not go under. This poem is called A Child. A child is full of pee and promise. A child slapped me once and I did not see stars, I saw potential. A child will sit down next to me and begin conversations, even if I am crying. Even if I'm crying, I listen. A child is full of promise, and I'm full of whatever I carry. A child is only full of desire and milk chocolate. I am at the mercy of fate, but the child has waved it away. I'm at the mercy of the gods, but they swoop in to muss the child's hair. I'm trying to tell a story, but the child is busy making wax wings. A child flies close to the sun and his wings do not melt. I identify the moon with my mind's eye. I wave at the child. I wave at the child. The child spits on my head. It's considered good luck, they said. It's considered a blessing. This poem is called Things That Wash Up. Things that wash up. Actors and singers, us ahead of dinner. A rock so white we assumed it was clean bone. Messages in bottles, our clothes in the sink with dish soap. The dishes themselves, kids before bed, a career. One time, a crazy green butterfly, wings preserved, black boxes from airplanes, whole whales, animals that have been in the water too long, so they look like monsters. Ships and shipwrecks. One time at the end of vacation, a branch still holding edible limes. This poem is called Red Smear. Red Smear. The cold came back to rattle the pines, flicker on the gas lamps. I roll over a stretch of natal daffodils. At night, I sweat. At daytime, I head back to nature. Houses contain our auras. Telephone lines bring relief. I stopped looking at the simulations, the red wave, blushing up east to west. I miss big plot twists, but keep watching. I love a big grave, a slab of heavy marble, a statue of a weeping nymph, water cascading from a tipped vessel. The cemetery is ripe with pine cones. The sunshine fooled us into being fools. It felt great out there. No wind, everyone golden, someone weaving baskets. May it be so. A blessing shot to heaven. May it be so, a prayer of redemption, a great offering into the maw. The aura is the soul's signal, unfolding, pointing north, ready for a cosmic slurp, the comfort of heaven. And this last poem is called Who Am I Kidding? Who am I kidding? Even now, with the tops of these houses brutal in the cold, the branches stiff, I love winter. I love the cat's open eye, the way the trees imprint, the fact of the sky. The gunman drill disguised as a skunk attack, the random geometry of shadows. The ginkgo leaves, they're yellow. What to do with them? The Lux bedroom rug looks like water at sunset, which is clearly in summer, which is clearly less difficult than February. No one has glowing skin. The house ghost is infrequent, unreliable in its presence. I craft at the very edge of creating, not because I can't, but because I won't. It's much better to carry all this in my head. Your loneliness sits on the edge of the bed. Marnie tried to tell me it was the ghost, but I knew better. It's in the snapping light, in the footsteps down the hall, but rarely at night, never intimidating. It's like it knows there's only so much that we can handle. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I love the cosmic slurp. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna quote you on that one. Cosmic slurp. That's a really good thing. I'm going to introduce Betsy. I don't have a little bio on you, Betsy, but Betsy's done lots of different things in her life. She's been in Rhode Island for a few years and is integral to Core Connects Rhode Island. Recently joined our board. She's a neuropsychologist and works a lot. She is another new grandbaby was born in the Netherlands. She just got back and she's going to read us her poetry. That's it. You're up.
I have 2 poems. First one's called Angels in My Tzedakah Box. Getting ready for Sunday school, I always had a missing shoe or lost my socks. But when it was time for Tu B'Shvat, I knew exactly where to find my tzedakah box. Nestled next to my pillow, it was my lullaby timbrel to fall asleep. I shook the dimes from grandparents and the pennies foraged from kitchen drawers and gave each coin a secret name for the tree it would be. My father heard the rattling one night and turned on the light. It's a tzedakah box, Pookie, not a tambourine. I know, Daddy, it's going to Israel. Those are angels singing for the trees. The day we brought our blue and white tins to Sunday school, a frenzy of wild box shaking quickly reached a high C. It was clear Mrs. Grubman understood the magic of tzedakah when she yelled out, "Children, let's make a percussion band together for the trees." Then we went to the temple garden and planted little flowers, like they'd be spiritual pen pals for our trees. Years later, an evangelical church bought the temple. The flowers may be gone, but the angels are still singing to my trees. That was in kindergarten. Okay, the next one is called The Cherry Tree of Souls. Trees can be a cultural checklist, from knock on wood and go climb a tree to barking up the wrong tree and not falling far from the tree. But what about the tree of life? It's the one that keeps us whole. For me, it's a very old and particular one, a childhood tree of souls. The apex of our neighborhood as children was our cherry tree at Yard's End. Flanked by lilac bushes, it bordered a mossy stone wall, low enough to climb for every child we called a friend. My brother, sister, and I were part of the gaggle hearing a mother's call to dinner at dusk, spending years with no sense of time, just being, laughing, and playing our best. The cherry tree became our place card at life's changing table and kept the 3 of us whole. No matter where we were, it grounded us as time passed and nourished our collective soul. In our 30s, it was the safe harbor to untangle the tolls of life that began to ring: work, spouses, children, ambitions, transitions. And the cherry blossoms kept reminding us that life was in its spring. In our 40s, we shared the first pang of pain that our lives here might not outlast the tree. That's when we made a written pact to meet after life under the cherry tree blossoms at the stone wall on June 30th of 2183. So many years later now, time and soul remain our companions. We learn new ways to find joy and let go of fear, and still imagine that when our grandchildren or great-grandchildren marry, maybe we could be here. My brother, sister, and I still look forward to meeting at the cherry tree, whether it's there or not. We will again feel whole, knowing that when it happens, we will be there together as souls.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I think we should print these all up and share them again. They're all so beautiful and individual and unique and touch different parts of us. Thank you. Thank you so much, Betsy. Thank you. Deborah, I'm going to ask Deborah to go next. Where are you, Deborah? Deborah Price is an artist, a member of Temple Emmanuel, and a budding, pun intended, haha, Hebrew student. So I'm going to call on you, Deborah, to go next, please.
So, okay, the first thing I want to say is I had trouble selecting, not of my own, but of others, because there are so many poems that feature trees and are about trees that I adore. So that was tough. But anyway, and then I wrote a poem in Hebrew about trees and decided that that was silly to read it to you in Hebrew. So I think it works way better in Hebrew than it does in English. However, I'm going to read it in English. And then I'm just going to follow up with something that I like, that I found. Tree, verdant, vigorous. It grows, it buds, it flourishes. Beauty, shade, food, shelter. It stands, it bends, trembles, bare, tired, soldier. And then, give me 1 second. This poem is called Trees. It's by Joyce Kilmer. I like old poems about trees. And Joyce Kilmer wrote this in 1913 and made me smile after I wrote mine. Trees. I think I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree.
Perfect. Beautiful. Thank you, Deborah. So lovely. Thank you for sharing. Jill, you're up. Jill, the instigator behind this idea. So thank you, Jill, again for bringing this together, because we're such a treat to hear everybody. Jill is a cultural journalist and a poet with an interest in the sacred and nature. She's written and performed poetic sequences on the forests of Lithuania, plane trees in France, and a liberation dialogue engaging the text of Aviva Zornberg. And she's my friend, and she also lives on the east side. So, Jill, you are last but not least.
Thank you. I am so happy that everyone is joined us to celebrate together. It's really, really lovely and really interesting to hear all the different leafings, the different aspects of ways of approaching Tu B'Shvat, which is such a wonderful holiday to have here. I have two. I wrote 4 new poems, and in the past 10 days or so for this, and I have two themes. They are that we are charged with being custodians of the earth, caretakers. The earth is God's, it's God's creation, and we're here to not to dominate or to master, but obviously to live with and to take care. And the second theme, as if that's not big enough, is ripeness. And also part of the injunction of the holiday is that we don't pick fruit from any tree that's not ready. It's about maturity, and the trees have to. It's a birthday of the trees, that they must be 3 years old before the fruit is picked at all. And in the fourth year, fruit goes to the priest, and in the 5th year, we're allowed to eat it. So that idea of the importance of ripeness. So my first, my first poem is called Ways of the Accordion. It's about the relationships of all kinds. the breath of trees and humans, the breath of God and humans, and just the very basic idea of exchange and relationship. So, ways of the accordion. Alone under a summer tree, I hear a lisp, draw it into my lungwort organ, deep to my guts harmonium. I breathe it out, she breathes me in. The world hangs on the music of the accordion. In and out, this, that is the always rhythm. Even in winter, when tree branches end in fine antlers, grass skirts of pine wave, and the green lung is redone by a man with a bow tie and an accent who plays tunes in an Italian restaurant. We dance aghast, staring at the abyss, hearing the still, small voice on the other side of the door, outside the chambers of lover's heart, breathing softly, knocking, begging to be let in. This poem is called "The Green of Eden is Not the Ripeness of My Apple or Unripe Fruit." Poor green fruit, reeking of January and the jetway. Cold, you shimmer in your cellophane robe. With chaos threading our heads, promise of juice and color, I know you'll thud like leather. To wait is water torture. For ripeness, for the sun to purple the plum. Hover from rise to slant in stealth. Mystery inside each shift. Who bothers? History is a belly of unripe fruit. There's art in digestion. Bitterness swings from branches. Crusaders, we roam the plains of the future. New sap is rising in trees unseen. Leave us time to dream, say the peaches, voices weak with greening. This is not plush Eden. You will never awaken love, says the Shulamite. Swear off plucking green, cultivate. This poem is my retelling of the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son. In the story in the Talmud, these two sages were had to hide in a cave for 12 years, and then they emerged sort of disfigured or somewhat disturbed. And so even the most spiritually evolved of us slip in being in our charge to be custodians of the earth. So that's the introduction. It's called The Green World. Did you emerge from the cave to destroy my world? 1. In ancient days, 2 rabbis on the run from the Romans for teaching Torah fled to a cave where they escaped to the book, away from spies, jackals, and little foxes, homme sensuel and femme sensuelle. They ate from a carob tree, feeling holier every day. Word has it they buried themselves in sand up to the neck as they studied sacred origins. Deep in the sand, split off from their vegetal glory, they failed to notice their sprouting beards or flowing juices. Seed to seed, spring to spring, the greening green, their attention whittled over 12 long years, 2 pairs of eyes staring at flickering letters, at each other getting brighter and brighter, 2 sticks kindling sparks. 2. Caesar's dead, said the prophet. Told to emerge, rejoin the world, these creatures of bone spurs and inward gaze, stare and stare at lesser humans, plowing and sowing, profaning themselves with ephemerality and greening. From judgment, little fires erupt. Everything the sages lay their eyes on burns. Brush fire, grass fire, seedling fire, ossified bone fire, fossil fuel fire, all asphyxiating. From the inside of divine anarchy, where they haplessly stood, the green trickles, the trees, the healing and living, designed to percolate through the rest of existence. They were sent back to the cave. This poem is an ode to my favorite trees, the plane trees, or platanes as they're known in French, and they line these very quiet, gorgeous country roads, giving them a presence and a dignity, with their arms raised, and arms raised always as if they're dancing. I've never doubted that they're living beings, and now they're struggling. So I wrote an entire sequence on them, but this of like 25 poems, and just in the like this week, I sort of at 4 a.m, a kind of summary of all those 25 poems came into this one poem.
Yes.
It's called To the Platane. To my sister trees that line French roads, I am faithful as one dancer to another. Slender trunk, feet poised on the dusty runway, scattered with jewels and shade, your skirts of ink, your skirts of silk, each one a Shulamite. Let us see your graceful gait, your dark throat, that of a diva giving us entrance, as a prophet's words stay mystery. You speak the world's languages, those of birds, humans, the dead, carrying lightly beyond time what you have seen. Feathers, Napoleon's armies, plunder from sphinxes, horse and carriages, lovers in deux chevaux. To you, this is recent history. Although cars sometimes batter themselves against your pale skin, your arms, lithe and myriad, lushly leafing, are always raised. This is your dance, your praise. As your slinky movement is always becoming, I should have known how close ode is to elegy. Elegant and stately, lines of chorus, their own becoming, dark eloquence.
Wow, beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Wow. So well, we're ending on a high, but I'm happy for anybody who wants to make comments or say anything, or just unmute yourself and make a comment, thought, greeting, blessing.
I just wanted to say thank you to you for this. It was wonderful.
Well, thank you to all the ladies who shared their poetry, really. And
It's so much fun to have an exchange. Yeah, my poem about relationship, there's just, there's nothing that exists in its own. So this kind of back and forth and exchange, a listening, a giving, a listening, a breathing in, a breathing out. It just seems so much, the theme of the holiday, but also, what else can we do? It's what we're here for, really. So it's very enriching, and it just seems like this is the life-giving thing, moment to moment. So thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah,
for
sure.
listening. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm going to share the video because people did want to listen that were not able to come live. So that will happen. And thank you for your contributions. Thank you for coming. We are planning a spa night on Thursday night. It's going to be Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so it's the 23rd of March. So look out for that. And we have a book group coming up also. So just there's a couple of things coming up. And thank you for coming. Have a beautiful, sweet Tu B'Shvat with all the potential of the rising sap and the blossoming of the almond trees that is very currently happening now in Israel.
Thank you.
Happy Tu B'Shvat.
Thank you.
Happy Tu B'Shvat.
Thank you so much.